Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Decentralized podcast, where we bring you all the latest news, information, education on everything Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrency. I'm here with Kosh as usual, and on today's episode, we've got Greg Medcraft.
Yes, now Greg was the former chairman, head of ASIC, which is Australia's version of the SEC. Greg is now the Director of Financial and Enterprise Affairs at the OECD, which is basically the policy arm of the G20.
Yeah, these guys, they take care of conduct, corporate governance, financial education, consumer protection, financial markets, investments, insurance. Basically, they help write policy for all the major countries in the world, the G20, for all of the things that sort of cover that area.
Absolutely. So that policy gets trickled down and put into things like conventions and multilateral treaties that then go into law.
Yep.
And look, today's episode, it got a little bit heated.
Yeah, it's kind of like the clash of the philosophies. On one side, you know, we've got the libertarians, the free market supporters, the Bitcoiners and all that sort of stuff, versus kind of like the men behind the curtain, the ones,
Exerting control from behind the scenes.
People who make policies, etc. So there's a lot of really good information. And like Kosh said, it got a little bit heated at times, and we all know where we sort of stand on the philosophies around what we're doing in this space.
Absolutely. I'm sure Greg does too.
Yeah.
After this.
So guys, with this episode, we'd really like you guys to share it, because this is an important episode. I think it's really important for people to know where the points of contention are in the space, because that sort of defines why Bitcoin and why all of these things actually got created in the first place. So share it around on your YouTube, on your Twitters, on your LinkedIns, on wherever else you want to share it, and let's get this episode out to more people.
Absolutely. I think it's a must listen to episode.
And a must watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys will enjoy it. So leave some comments.
Decentralized.
Hey guys, we're here at APAC Blockchain in Melbourne. This is day 2. We finally got a hold of Greg Medcraft, who's currently working at OECD and was previously the chair at ASIC, the chairman at ASIC here in Australia. So I'll let him do an introduction, because he'll do it much better than I will, and then we'll go into questions. So, Greg?
Okay, look, I'm the Director of Enterprise Affairs and Finance at the OECD in Paris.
Fantastic.
And as you know, the OECD advises governments around the world on a whole range of issues. In my area, it can go from advising on competition law to bribery and corruption to pensions, insurance, or investment.
That's wide.
Yes. So, and then prior to that, I was the chairman of ASIC for nearly 7 years and chairman of the International Organization of Securities Commissions for about 4 years, which actually deals with 120 countries around the world. And before that, I was at Societe Generale for 30 years, and in the last decade, I was the global head of securitizations. So working on Wall Street. So I've got quite a varied career. Yeah.
Quite a varied. Well, so Greg, well, I guess in that case,
I'm still having fun.
I can see that you are. Well, here you are at a blockchain conference, of course.
I love innovation.
So, Greg, I guess the first question that I really want to ask, and I'm not going to go in any order here. I do have a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you, but what 2 parts to this. Number one, how did you move from ASIC to OECD? Because that's obviously a global organization. So what prompted that? And then from there, I'd like to sort of know, what OECD's real interest is in sort of blockchain and crypto. So we'll start with the first part.
So how I moved, well, I was chairman of a global international organization, and I was a member of the Financial Stability Board of the G20.
Yep.
So I guess I had the experience of chairing a very large global organization, and it was probably a natural thing to then go, when I left ASIC, to actually go to a global organization. Okay. It was probably pretty likely. And the OECD also has a link with France, because I worked at Societe Generale for 30 years, so I had both a French link and a finance and then a global organization. And why is the OECD interested in this? Well, the mantra of the OECD is actually helping governments design better policies for better lives.
Okay.
That's what we're about. We're about having outcomes that result in helping people have better lives. And one of the big things we're focused on these days is inclusive economic growth. So it's no good having economic growth if it's not inclusive, right? So one of the attractions of blockchain or distributed ledger, whether it be in finance or in business, to the extent that either, if it reduces transaction costs or it brings greater transparency in supply chain, so we have better provenance, we see where our products have come from. If it's actually in the issues of energy, protecting energy grids, that's all for better lives, right? So that's why we're interested in it. But also, governments are demanding or asking, what do they do about it? Because they can see, they're being asked about, what do we do about blockchain in our country on payment systems or supply chains? So there's sort of a bit of a push and a pull thing here. But at the end of the day, the reason is we think it's something that's consistent with our mission, which is ethos, better policies for better lives. That's what we do.
Okay, I've got an interesting question for you here. So differentiating between blockchain and an application of blockchain, which is cryptocurrencies, and a form of virtual currency that you can do value exchange with. So obviously the OECD is pro-blockchain in terms of efficiencies and transparencies and all of that you just mentioned.
Well, we're sort of not necessarily pro the technology. We like the technology because of the outcomes it produces. We're sort of technology neutral, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, what's the OECD's stance on, for example, the disruption that these currencies are bringing? So, we've lived in a world for the last X amount of hundreds of years with more state-run currencies and state-run means of exchange. Now, you've got people being able to transact between each other anywhere in the world at any time instantly using this internet funny money. So do you guys see that as a fad, or do you see that as a real thing that's happening? Like, what's the OECD's viewpoint?
So, look, we are very much in favor of global free trade, global free flow of investment.
Okay.
One of the areas that I'm responsible for is investment, managing the multilateral convention on free investment flows around the world. So that's in our DNA.
Yep.
Okay. Now, to the extent that blockchain helps supply chains and extends supply chains to small and medium-sized enterprises, which it does, that's fabulous, right? And a lot of that is enabled by blockchain. Equally, it's enabled, with digital currencies. They enable remittance transfers at very low cost to people between emerging markets at a fraction of the cost that it's done today. That's all very good. The only one problem that we have with, say, anonymous digital currencies is they could be anonymous between us, but there has to be some traceability for law enforcement, tax authorities, etc. So if you're using a digital currency for an illegal means, then we need to be able to track that. So it can remain anonymous between you and I as individuals, but still there's got to be somebody there's got to be the ability to actually look over it from certain parties. And that's the only aspect of it that is an issue for governments, frankly, is the lack of traceability. So what we're seeing, though, is I think the future belongs more in permission ledgers where they can, where you've got a combination of public and private, so we can be anonymous between us, but above us, somebody can, if there's something it's illegal, it can be traced. That's the big. If it's basically completely anonymous, and tax authorities and law enforcement agencies can't trace it, then that's a problem.
Okay. So in other words, you don't like
because also
something
at the
like
same
Monero.
time, OECD is very much focused on tax.
Yeah.
Right. We have a tax. We've been the convention of the base erosion of profits taxes. That's an OECD convention of 140 countries. So we're also focused on tax because we want to make sure that everyone pays fairly their share of tax. Right. That's all the same.
Okay.
Back to the same stuff.
Talking about that, if the OECD is sort of lays the framework for global cooperation for tax compliance,
which we have, yeah.
So I guess it's by virtue, you guys will be doing the same thing for the compliance for this space, the regulatory environment for this space?
Well, I think what I said this morning, it certainly, I think there's an opportunity for us to work with industry to perhaps set a framework of policy or guidance that could help governments dealing with blockchain or ICOs. Yes.
And talking about these sort of anonymous and private ways people can transact now that's outside of the traditional system, there's going to be a big challenge there for regulators with these new forms of currency and technology. And how do you guys think that will be tackled? Will it just be a case of outlawing them, or how do you?
I don't think you outlaw them. It'd be basically, if you want to buy them, you'll have to register as an individual your account with a central authority or something like that, and then you can still transact anonymously between you and another party, and provided that other party is registered with a government agency, if anything goes wrong, they can trace the money, right? But not between, you can still remain anonymous. But above you, if there's a need to, if basically there's some suspicious reason why you've transferred the money, that needs to be traceable. So you can still have, so it can still work. And the way, as you talked to Austrac earlier, there's going to be a requirement anyway now to actually do the AML KYC on individuals.